Hi there, I'm Mark Isero, and this is Article Club, where we read, annotate, and discuss one great article every month on race, education, or culture. Welcome back, and thank you so much for listening. It's nearly August, everyone, which means it's time to announce the article of the month. I am very honored to share with you that we're going to be diving into an article called They Burn Books to Burn Us Too by Saint Trey W. The piece was published in April in Saint Trey's Substack publication, Notes from the Undrowned. The essay explores how state regimes, most notably the United States government, have banned books in an attempt to dominate Black bodies and to erase Black memory. The goal, Saint Trey writes, is, quote, not only control, but the elimination of imagination. But no matter the government's violence, Black people will not be silenced. They will not be unwritten. Saint Trey writes, quote, what they do not know is that we were never written in the first place. We were sung. We were carved into tree trunks and kitchen counters and braided into our mother's hair. We are older than their archives. And our stories do not end with silence. They begin in fire. As you probably can abundantly tell, I have deep respect for this essay and have deep admiration for Saint Trey as a writer. I'm hopeful that you'll read the piece and join our discussion on Sunday, August 24th at 2 p.m. Pacific time. All right, so to give you a little bit more background and to introduce this piece a little more, what I have for you right now is a conversation I had with Sarai Bordeaux, who many of you know is a longtime Article Club correspondent. She's an amazing poet and friend, and in fact, she's the poet laureate of Eureka, which you'll hear about. And when I came upon St. Trey's piece, I knew that I wanted to share it with her. Well, she loved the essay too, and so it made sense that Sarai would interview him. That interview you'll hear in a couple of weeks, but I wanted to bring Sarai on the show today so she could share her first impressions of the essay and also how it felt to interview St. Trey. I hope you take a listen for all those reasons, and also because Sarai's wonderful and she speaks about what it means to be a poet and an artist right now, and what it profoundly meant to share space with another poet and artist. Here's my chat with Sarai. Hey, Sarai, so good to see you again.
Hey, Mark.
Don't you like the beginning of these conversations? It's like, hey.
I love them. You have to dive in somehow, so you may as well start with a hey.
Exactly. It's been a while. It's been a while, but it's so good to see you again on Article Club. How's it been?
As everybody knows, Mark, it's been a time. There's been some new things happening. I'm still working, still substitute teaching. Well, it's the summer now, so I was teaching writing camp, but yeah, some working with some organizations, doing some things with the People's Kitchen Collective, Earthseed Project. I also became the poet laureate of Eureka, Mark.
Which when I heard about that, I wanted to ask you about it immediately. Yeah, it just came up. Somehow I found out. And
Mhm.
then I was like, oh, well, this makes sense. Yeah, Sarai is now the poet laureate of Eureka. So you don't have to go into like how that all went down, but how is it? Like what does this even mean?
Like I'm still discovering that. I'm still like figuring that out for myself. And honestly, like I feel like in a lot of spaces, poet laureate has been kind of like a ceremonial title. But people are really figuring out and cities are figuring out that poets have a lot to say. And they often have a lot to say in a way that many, many people are willing to listen. So this poet laureate project, the city's focusing on like what it's like to be a person in Eureka. And often cities will have like a theme or a certain thing like that. But honestly, just like working on what it means to be recognized for my art. And that's something that's really joyous for me right now. And it's really making me think about things in a different way. So, yeah, I'm like doing readings, figuring out how to make connections. I've been in like a poet laureate meeting where I'm getting to talk to other poet laureates. So, it's all like super fun things, Mark.
It's so amazing. Okay, I do want to hear a little bit. Did they just call you up like the Nobel Prize? Like how did you find out one day?
I wish. I wish. Honestly, my friend who's the poet laureate in Anaheim, where kind of close to where I grew up, she was like, "Hey, like this is a fun thing. Like I applied for it. Like, does your city have something like this?" And at that time, the answer was no. When I emailed, they were like, "We don't have that right now, but check back with us because we are gonna have a call for a poet laureate." So it was like an application process. And so I applied and it was super nice because a lot of people were like, "Hey, like you should apply for this." Like So that felt really good. But yeah, it was an application process and I was chosen.
That's so good. Yeah, can you speak a little bit about, especially now in our times, whatever that means? Like
Mhm.
it just feels like, I mean, you've always been a poet, but I've never really asked you, like, as far as like how does poetry speak to you, especially now? Where do you see the role? Like, why do we need it even more now? Is it speaking to you differently personally now? Or is it also just like a continuation of your work for years?
I think because this writing group that I'm talking about, we have an anthology. It's a Patrice Lumumba anthology of writers on Black liberation, and it was the Patrice Lumumba like writing group. And so that for me was like one of the first times where I was like, oh my gosh! And this was during the pandemic 2020. Like I had always been writing and different things, but the poetry and the flow of it like came to me heavy during that time. There was a lot of workshopping, a lot of like being heard and seen and sharing, and so the continuation of it right now is that like people people are asking like, what do we do? How do we be in community? How do we get through this? And I think that poets and poetry, you know, they have a way of, like I was saying before, speaking to people in a way that it's possible to listen. Kind of the barriers and the boundaries that we're looking at breaking down, poets are able to kind of like stick something in there and start that dismantling with their words. And so for me, like it's a continuation of feeling heard and feeling seen, but also a continuation of like what I can add right now because things are rough. Like things are really rough. And sometimes we don't feel like we're enough in a lot of spaces, but poetry like is the space where I always feel like I'm enough and like I'm doing enough. So yeah, it's like a reassurance, a fortification, like a plan, oracle.
Yeah, for me, obviously, like my whole relationship with poetry is one that, I'm not sort of like an expert or whatever. But as far as like being drawn, I
Mhm.
am noticing that I'm a little bit more drawn in similar ways to what you just are speaking to. And I think maybe that may have been one of the reasons that I was drawn to this piece as well. Because it's sort of like I was just reading stuff. The piece, by the way, is it's time to sort of introduce it now a little bit. This month, we're going to be looking at this essay called They Burn Books to Burn Us Too. And it's by Saint Trey W. And I don't know, like it's an essay, but I think I was drawn to it not just because of the content, but because of the language and specifically like the lyricalness and then there was poetry in it, and obviously he's a poet as well. And so there was something about this. I was like, okay, well, Sarai's got to read it. Like I was like, I thought of you immediately. And so I just sent it over to you. And do you remember how it was on the first read, like when you read it?
Yeah, like, I first read the piece and it was between a lot of things. Like, I remember the email popping up and I remember being like, "Oh," like because you always pick such depthful, interesting things. And I feel like it was at a time in my like experience where I was really needing to see something like this. The way it's written, like you're saying, how lyrically it's written, how much it involves, like the kind of journey that it takes us on. Sometimes I don't feel like everything I'm thinking or everything that I want to say, I don't think it's possible for it to fit together. And so when I read this, I was just like, it was just a sigh of relief. Like I feel like I cried about it, honestly, because even though like I was saying, like poetry makes me feel it never makes me feel like I'm not enough. Like what surrounds the poetry, like all of those things, like are condensing in on our shoulders. And so reading this kind of felt like a deep breath. Like it really felt like, okay, like this is something that's gonna end up, this type of writing is really important. Because sometimes we get really deep and really technical and really like qualitative, or quantitative. I don't know which one. The one that does not involve a lot of stories. But it's really important for us to like be able to chew on things, right? In an artful way. So I felt held. I felt like my mind was like buzzing. I was able to chew on this writing and relate to it heavily. So yeah, I always appreciate what you send, but this one, like this time, like it's something that I needed like in my life as an artist.
Yeah, I would agree as far as like I mean, this is a topic as far as like the idea of banning books or even
Mhm.
like the erasure of history that maybe is a topic over the last few years we may have heard of, but the way that he was able to bring it back to something that was like so foundational and so profound and in a new way, it got
Mhm.
my attention again. And it
Yeah.
was like, let me think about this in different ways. I have this idea that actually this topic, I don't know how I feel about saying this, but like I have this idea that this is almost become like a white progressive and like white progressive female sort of topic with regard to like LGBTQ books and or queer books or whatever in
Mhm.
library
Mhm.
spaces. And that's sort of like it was like becoming almost, I guess, normalized. And so like the way that he sort of brought it back for me as a white reader, like was just like really important for me to read.
Yeah, like we hear oftentimes that, what is affecting black folks, like you could see it how things affect black folks, you will eventually see affect other marginalized groups. And this is not like a hierarchy or oppression Olympics type thing, but it is to say that everything that we've faced, you will see it again in the effort to oppress other folks. And so for there to be such a large conversation right now about banning books in LGBTQ IA plus like circles, or the different issues around that, like it's real, this writing really brings it back to the need for like solidarity, like for the need for all of us to understand like the tactics and the structure of systems. And please remember to, in the effort to highlight an issue that you're facing, it is important to highlight how that has affected other marginalized groups so that siloing doesn't occur. And so when that doesn't happen, when the homage is not, and homage to oppression is a fucking terrible thing to have to say, but when that homage to the history is not paid and not understood, like you feel a gap is missing. And this piece really like it creates an opportunity for folks to see like why those gaps need to be filled in. And I really appreciate that because you could come at it from a way of like, talking down to people or whatever. And this piece doesn't do that.
Absolutely not. And it's like historical, it's international, it's systemic, as you say.
Mhm.
And it's just so beautifully written with like an economy, of language and, a poeticness to it as well. And just
Mhm.
every single line. And so, yeah, I'm so happy when I sort of thought you would like it, but of course I get nervous. So I'm happy that you liked it. And then I was like, hey, Sarai, do you want to go ahead and interview, Saint Trey? And then you said yes, which was great. And
Mhm.
then you went ahead and said hello. And that's going to come out in a couple weeks, by the way, so
Yeah.
everybody can listen. But I wanted to ask you, like, how was that space, with Saint Trey to be able to talk about his piece for the 20 or 30 minutes that you had?
Like there is something about, when you get ready to do an important work or you get ready to do something, like there's always this moment of like, ooh, like, is this going to be good? Or like, am I really good at am I actually good at this? Or is this going to matter? And I'm really grateful that slowly those questions are becoming less and becoming quieter. And the time I spend like agonizing over how good it's going to be is getting shorter and shorter. And part of that is because of conversations that I had like this that I had with Saint Trey, is the ability to just see another artist, and see another how passionate another artist is about their work, and to be able to like be a fan and also be like a contemporary, right? I feel like sometimes we're so scared to say how much we like something, or we're so scared to say how much things affect us, or so scared to let another artist know like how vulnerable this is making you feel. But I feel like I was saying, like this came about in a time in my life that I really needed to be held. And that conversation really held me. And I feel like I was able to offer some holding as well. And so like in the spaces where sometimes we're concerned about our work, like or concerned about what the difference is that could be made, like conversations like this, like is like, oh yes, 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 yes. Like this is reinforcing, this is validating, this is like another level of care and another level of support, not just as people, but as people putting out this work, because it's a heavy thing to be processing things like this, and then to be able to have such a beautiful piece be reflected back to you, I feel like is a real treasure and a real gift that artists can offer each other. And so after reading this, I really wanted Saint Trey to know like how much it meant to me. And so like to be able to do that and say that was really, really special. And to be able to like get into it, like step out of my fangirl thing, step out of my like having a hard time as a person, but really chew on these issues and these topics as artists and as Black people, thinking about our libraries being burned. Like I literally have since the article started amassing again like a library, you know? And so yeah, I feel like this conversation, it's very intimate, it's very personal. Like y'all should feel very honored to hear it, honestly, because it's a conversation between folks realizing that they're not alone in real time. And that is really special.
Yeah, I mean, just in the brief sort of time that I was just being able to interact and engage with Saint Trey, again, like it's just this idea of a generosity of spirit, and then
Mhm.
also with you too. And I just really look forward to listening more deeply, as well as to have this conversation between you and Saint Trey to go out to article clubbers, as a gift. And so,
Yeah.
sir, I want to thank you too, because I just send you stuff, and then you're like, you have a full life, as an educator, as a poet laureate. So for you to just say, yes to it too, I want to thank you for your generosity and for your contribution as well. Like just deep, deep. And also, by the way, I have to tell everybody all the time, sir, like you're like one of the best readers I have ever, like the most astute, closest readers I've ever met. So it's always wonderful to work with you a little bit.
It's honestly, Mark, like, yeah, there is a lot of stuff going on and stuff, but when I feel like it's always very serendipitous when you send me things. What you're offering to me and how you offer the things is very, very supportive. Like I feel very like nurtured by that because some of these pieces I wouldn't know about because I'm doing so many things and because, there's so many things to be reading. And I feel like every time you ask is something that really adds to my writing, it adds to my reading, it adds to my life. So I appreciate you, bud.
Likewise, I appreciate you, and I hope you have a wonderful. You have so many things already happening today and this week, so just looking forward to hearing more about all the stuff that you're doing. So thank you again, Sarai.
Yes. Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much.
Hi again, it's Mark, and thank you so much for listening to this introduction of They Burn Books to Burn Us Too. I hope you appreciated my conversation with Sarai. I can't wait for you to listen to her interview with Saint Trey in a couple weeks. In the meantime, if you already know that you want to sign up for the discussion, please go to highlighter.cc/discussion. It'd be great to have you. All right, everyone, I hope you all have a wonderful weekend ahead.